The candles flickered across the pristine white tablecloth, casting unsteady shadows that matched my unsettled heart. Silverware gleamed under the dim lighting of Stellato, the kind of upscale Italian restaurant where the menu had no prices, and the waitstaff moved like ghosts, silent, efficient, and practically invisible. Just like me. I smoothed the wrinkles of my black dress, the only decent one I owned, and tried to ignore the pitying glances from the hostess who had seated me 15 minutes ago. Table for one. 3 simple words that had felt like a confession of failure when I'd spoken them. "Would you care for another glass of wine while you wait, miss?" The waiter appeared at my elbow, his voice professionally neutral. But I caught the underlying assumption. Nobody was coming. "No, thank you." My voice emerged steadier than I felt. "Just the check, please." This dinner was a mistake, a desperate attempt to celebrate my 27th birthday alone, rather than in my cramped studio apartment with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating. The splurge had already cost me half my weekly budget. Single motherhood didn't leave room for luxuries like $12 glasses of house wine. As the waiter disappeared, I fumbled for my phone, pretending to check messages that wouldn't be there. My daughter Emma was with my neighbor Mrs. Patel tonight. At 6 years old, Emma deserved better than what I could give her. Better than a mother who worked 2 jobs and still struggled to keep up with rent. Better than hand-me-down clothes and denied requests for ballet lessons. I'd been invisible my entire life. To my foster parents who collected checks, to the teachers who never noticed my straight A's, to Emma's father who disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. Now, in a restaurant filled with couples and business dinners, I was invisible again. That's when I felt it. A shift in the atmosphere, like the air before a storm. The restaurant's ambient chatter dropped by several decibels. Through the restaurant's front windows, I watched 3 black SUVs pull up to the curb, sleek and menacing. Men in dark suits emerged first, scanning the area with practiced efficiency, before one opened the rear door of the middle vehicle. He stepped out like he owned not just the car or the restaurant, but the very ground beneath his feet. Even at a distance, power emanated from him. Tall and broad-shouldered in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. Dark hair styled impeccably. Shadow of stubble precisely maintained along a jaw that looked carved from granite. He moved with lethal grace, like a predator who never needed to rush because nothing ever escaped him. I couldn't look away. No one could. The restaurant fell almost silent as he entered, flanked by 2 men who might have been twins in their matching suits and vigilant expressions. The maitre d' practically sprinted to greet him, bowing slightly with a deference I'd never witnessed in real life. "Mr. Castellano, what an honor. Your usual table is ready." Castellano. The name registered faintly in my memory. Something from the local news, perhaps. Some wealthy businessman or politician I couldn't quite place. I forced my attention back to my half-eaten meal, trying to become invisible for entirely different reasons now. Men like him lived in a different universe from women like me. I didn't belong here, in his orbit, and drawing attention from powerful men never ended well for women struggling to make ends meet. I signaled the waiter again, suddenly desperate to leave, but he was nowhere to be found. The entire staff seemed magnetically pulled toward the restaurant's new arrival. I reached for my purse to extract cash and flee, when I felt, rather than saw, someone approach my table. "The lady will be joining me tonight." The voice was deep, accented slightly with Italian undercurrents, and brooked absolutely no argument. I froze, my hand still in my purse, and looked up slowly. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Dark eyes the color of espresso regarded me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. There was nothing friendly in his expression, just cool assessment and something else I couldn't name that made my heart hammer against my ribs. "I'm sorry?" The words came out as barely more than a whisper. The corner of his mouth lifted in something too predatory to be called a smile. I said. He lowered his voice and leaned closer, the scent of expensive cologne and something darker, dangerous, invading my senses. "Tonight, you're my wife." Before I could process what was happening, he slid into the chair across from me and nodded to one of his men. Instantly, the waiter who had been ignoring me materialized at our table, looking simultaneously terrified and eager to please. "Mr. Castellano, we're honored." "A bottle of the 1982 Brunello," he interrupted without looking at the waiter. His eyes remained fixed on me, dissecting, calculating. And we'll need privacy. The waiter vanished, and the restaurant's other patrons seemed to deliberately avert their gazes, suddenly finding their meals fascinating. I clutched my napkin under the table, my knuckles turning white. "I think there's been a mistake," I managed, my voice barely audible. "I don't know you." "Alessandra Castellano," he said, extending a hand across the table. "Though you may call me Sandro. And no, cara mia, there's no mistake." His hand remained extended between us, adorned with a single platinum ring on his right hand. The heavy signet ring bore some sort of family crest, a lion perhaps, though I couldn't make out the details. "I should go," I whispered, glancing around desperately for an escape route, but his men had positioned themselves strategically near the exits. "My daughter is with Mrs. Patel in apartment 3C until 9 o'clock. She's watching cartoons and eating pizza with pepperoni, no mushrooms." His expression never changed as he delivered this information that no stranger should know. "You have time." I slid down my spine. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things, Kara." He withdrew his hand when I didn't take it. But somehow the gesture felt like he was granting me temporary reprieve rather than accepting rejection. "Your name is Olivia Reed, 27 as of today, single mother to Emma, age 6. You work at Meridian Insurance during the day, and waitress at the Blue Orchid 3 nights a week. Your rent is due on the 1st, you're 3 months behind on your student loans, and Emma needs dental work you can't afford." Each fact landed like a physical blow. I felt stripped bare, exposed in a way that went beyond the physical. "Are you threatening me?" For the first time, something like genuine amusement flickered in his eyes. "If I were threatening you, Tesoro, you wouldn't need to ask." The wine arrived, presented with reverent hands by the sommelier. Sandro never took his eyes off me as the ritual of opening and pouring commenced. When we were alone again, he lifted his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice a low command. I didn't reach for my glass. "What do you want from me?" "For now, I want you to drink your wine, eat your dinner, and pretend we're celebrating our anniversary." His gaze flicked briefly to the restaurant entrance. "The man who just walked in, don't look, believes I'm a happily married man. It's in both our interests that he continues to believe this." Against my better judgment, curiosity sparked. "Why?" "Because, Olivia Reed," he said my name like he was tasting it. "The difference between us leaving this restaurant alive or dead tonight may depend on how convincingly you can play the role of my beloved wife." The threat should have terrified me into fleeing. But something in his tone, the flat certainty, devoid of drama or exaggeration, made my blood run cold in a different way. He wasn't threatening me. He was stating a fact. "I can't." "You can, and you will." He reached across the table, capturing my hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but unbreakable. "Smile at me like you love me, cara mia. Our lives depend on it." Something in his eyes, a flicker of something almost like vulnerability, made me hesitate. Then his thumb stroked across my knuckles in a gesture so intimate, it sent heat racing up my arm, and I found myself smiling automatically, my body responding to his touch before my mind could catch up. "There she is," he murmured, satisfaction evident in his tone. "My beautiful wife." "This is insane," I whispered through my smile, trying to keep my expression loving while panic clawed at my throat. "I don't even know your full name." "Alessandro Vittorio Castellano." His thumb continued its hypnotic movement across my skin. "Head of the Castellano family. And for tonight, your husband of 3 years." The Castellano family. Suddenly, fragments of news headlines connected in my mind. Suspected organized crime. Racketeering allegations that never stuck. Whispers of businesses that mysteriously changed hands after refusing protection. My smile faltered. "You're—" "Careful, Tesoro." His grip tightened infinitesimally. "Some words once spoken can't be taken back." I swallowed hard. "You're a businessman," I amended, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Very good." A man approached our table then, expensively dressed but with none of Sandro's refined elegance. There was something coarse about him, from his too loud laugh to his overly familiar slap on Sandro's shoulder. "Castellano, Holding out on me, you sly dog. The man's gaze raked over me with naked appreciation that made my skin crawl. Never mentioned a wife before. Sandro's expression remained pleasant, but something deadly flickered in his eyes. Mr. Rossi, I don't recall inviting you to my table. Come now, we're practically partners. Rossi pulled up a chair uninvited, his knee brushing mine under the table. I flinched involuntarily. Aren't you going to introduce me to the lovely signora? Before I could respond, Sandro's hand captured mine again, his thumb stroking possessively over the bare ring finger that suddenly felt conspicuously empty. My wife values her privacy, Sandro said smoothly. As do I. Can't she speak for herself? Rossi leered at me. What's your name, beautiful? I felt Sandro tense beside me, the predator ready to strike. In that moment, instinct took over, not self-preservation, but the strange urge to protect this dangerous man from whatever was about to happen. Alessandra, I said, letting my voice drop into a husky register as I leaned against Sandro's arm. But only my husband calls me that. Something dark and possessive flashed in Sandro's eyes as he glanced down at me. His arm slid around my waist, pulling me closer until I was practically in his lap. You see, Rossi, he said, never taking his eyes off me. My wife is shy with strangers. Shy? Rossi snorted. Women like that aren't shy. They're... Sandro's movement was so swift I barely registered it. One moment we were seated normally. The next his hand was somehow on Rossi's wrist, bending it at an angle that made the other man's face drain of color. Choose your next words with exceptional care, Sandro said, his voice soft and all the more terrifying for it. You're speaking about my wife. I should have been frightened. Instead, something molten and dangerous pooled in my stomach at the naked possession in his voice. No one had ever defended me before. No one had ever claimed me with such absolute certainty. No offense meant, Rossi choked out, sweat beading on his forehead. Beautiful woman. Lucky man. Sandro released him with a dismissive flick of his wrist. Indeed. Now if you'll excuse us, we're celebrating our anniversary. Rossi retreated, nursing his wrist and his wounded pride. When he was gone, Sandro's arm remained around me, his heat seeping through the thin fabric of my dress. You did well, he murmured against my ear, his breath sending shivers down my neck. But our evening is just beginning. I should have pulled away, should have gathered my things and run as fast and far as I could. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, drawn by some magnetic pull I couldn't explain. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely audible. His eyes darkened as they met mine. Now we make sure Rossi believes we're exactly what we appear to be. Deeply, passionately in love. His finger traced my jawline with feather-light precision. Can you do that for me, Olivia? The way he said my name, like a prayer and a sin wrapped into one, made it impossible to think clearly. Or perhaps, he continued, his gaze dropping to my lips, you'd prefer I take you home to your daughter now. This isn't your world. You could walk away, return to your life, and forget tonight ever happened. It was the first real choice he'd offered me, and something told me it might be the last. I should have taken it, grabbed my purse and fled back to my safe, predictable struggle of a life, back to overdue bills and empty refrigerators and falling asleep alone every night. Instead, I heard myself say, I can do it. Something like triumph flashed in his eyes. One night as my wife, he said, his finger still tracing the line of my jaw. Do exactly as I say, and tomorrow you'll find your financial situations improved. The implication was clear, and pride flared hot in my chest. I'm not for sale. No, he agreed, surprising me. You're not. Consider it compensation for your acting skills. His thumb brushed my lower lip in a gesture so intimate I forgot how to breathe. And I always pay my debts. The intensity of his gaze made me feel like prey and predator simultaneously. Why me? I whispered. You could have chosen anyone. Not anyone, he corrected. I needed someone unexpected. Someone Rossi couldn't have investigated in advance. His eyes traveled over my face with clinical assessment that somehow still felt like a caress. Someone beautiful enough to be believable as my wife. but not connected to my world. So I was just convenient. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, perhaps, or something darker. Let's find out how convenient this arrangement will be. He stood in one fluid motion, offering his hand. This time I took it, allowing him to pull me to my feet. The bill appeared and disappeared with a flash of platinum card. Then we were moving through the restaurant, his hand possessively at the small of my back, guiding me toward the waiting SUVs outside. Reality crashed back as we reached the door. Wait, my daughter will be picked up by my driver and brought to us if we're delayed beyond 9, he said smoothly. Mrs. Patel has already been compensated generously for extending her babysitting hours. The casual way he'd inserted himself into my life, making arrangements for my child, sent a chill through me. I can't let strangers take my daughter. He paused at the restaurant entrance, turning to face me fully. Nothing will happen to Emma, he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it yet. I give you my word. The word of a man who's forcing me to pretend to be his wife? His smile was sharp. The word of a man who protects what's his. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture strangely tender. And tonight, cara mia, you're mine. The night air hit my lungs like ice water, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from Sandro's hand at the small of my back. His bodyguards materialized around us, creating a human barrier between us and the street. One opened the door to the middle SUV, and before I could process what was happening, Sandro guided me inside with gentle pressure that somehow still felt like an inescapable command. The interior was all soft black leather and subtle luxury. Sandro slid in beside me, his thigh pressing against mine in the spacious back seat that suddenly felt too small. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like finality. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as the vehicle pulled away from the curb. Sandro studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim interior. The Rossi situation is more complicated than anticipated. We're going to my home. Your home? But I can't. I need to get back to Emma. As I said, arrangements have been made. His tone left no room for argument, yet something in his eyes softened as he registered my panic. Your daughter will be brought to us if necessary, or returned to your apartment if we conclude our business quickly. Our business. The phrase hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to consider. What exactly is this situation with Rossi? I asked, desperate to understand what I'd been dragged into. Sandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Franco Rossi believes he can force a partnership with my family through threats and leverage. Tonight was meant to be a negotiation. And I'm the leverage? Or the distraction? His lips curved in that not-quite smile that made my stomach flip. You're the complication he wasn't expecting. Rossi has been investigating my personal life for weeks, looking for pressure points. He believes discovering my secret wife gives him an advantage. Does it? I asked, suddenly aware of how little I knew about the dangerous game I was playing. Sandro's hand settled on my knee, the weight of it both reassuring and terrifying. On the contrary, Kara, you've given me the advantage. The city lights slid past the tinted windows as we drove deeper into the wealthy lakefront district I'd only seen in magazine spreads. Eventually, we turned onto a private drive flanked by tall iron gates that opened silently at our approach. The house, mansion really, appeared through the darkness, a sprawling modern structure of glass and stone perched on the lake's edge. More security personnel patrolled the grounds, barely visible in the strategic landscape lighting that illuminated the manicured gardens. "Welcome home," Sandro murmured, as the SUV stopped at the front entrance. His emphasis on home sent an involuntary shiver through me. Inside, the house was a study in minimalist luxury, soaring ceilings, clean lines, and art pieces that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined. A staff member appeared silently, took Sandro's coat, and disappeared without a word. Drink? Sandro moved to a bar cart that gleamed with crystal decanters. I need to understand what's happening, I said, remaining firmly by the entryway. What does Rossi want from you? Why did you need a fake wife tonight? And most importantly, how long do I have to keep up this charade? Sandro poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, ignoring my refusal. Rossi controls certain ports I require for my import business. He recently discovered one of my lieutenants was skimming profits and believes this gives him leverage to demand a full partnership. And that's bad, because Franco Rossi is a rabid dog who would destroy everything my family has built over 3 generations. His voice remained calm, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He deals in human trafficking, among other distasteful enterprises I don't allow in my territory. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the comfortable temperature of the room. So you're saying you're the better criminal? In an instant, he was before me, moving with that predatory grace that made my heart race. He lifted my chin with one finger, forcing me to meet his gaze. I'm saying, cara mia, that there are lines even men like me don't cross. His eyes searched mine. And tonight, you helped me draw one of those lines. How? I whispered, unable to look away from the intensity of his stare. Rossi now believes I have a wife I've kept hidden to protect. He'll think twice before moving against me directly. His thumb traced my lower lip, sending electricity coursing through my veins. He knows the rules of our world. Families are sacred. I'm not actually your wife, I reminded him, my voice embarrassingly breathless. Something dark and possessive flickered across his features. Details, he murmured, his accent thickening. His hand slid to cup my cheek, and I found myself leaning into his touch before I could stop myself. The phone in his pocket vibrated, breaking the moment. Sandro stepped back, checking the screen with a frown. "Excuse me," he said, moving toward what appeared to be an office. "Make yourself comfortable. This won't take long." When he disappeared, I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of the situation. I was in a Mafia boss's home, pretending to be his wife, because some rival criminal thought it would give him leverage. It was insanity. I should call the police, or run, or both. I pulled out my phone, relieved to find I still had service. My finger hovered over the emergency call button, but something stopped me. What would I even say? Help. I'm being held captive by a devastatingly handsome crime lord who's offering to solve my financial problems if I pretend to be his wife for one night. Besides, Sandro knew where Emma was, where I lived. My entire life history, apparently. Instead, I texted Mrs. Patel. "How's Emma?" The response came almost immediately. "Sleeping like an angel. Your husband's friend dropped off her favorite teddy bear and extra money for me to watch her overnight if needed." Such a thoughtful man. Why didn't you tell me you were married? I stared at the message in disbelief. Husband? Teddy bear? I hadn't mentioned Emma's missing teddy bear to Sandro. The stuffed animal had disappeared during our last move, and Emma had been heartbroken. How could he possibly know about it, much less replace it? Before I could process this, a female voice startled me. "So you're the wife." I spun around to find a stunning woman leaning against the doorframe. Tall, model-esque, with sleek black hair, and eyes that matched Sandro's in both color and intensity. She wore a designer dress that made my own look like a cheap rag in comparison. Relax, she said, her smile revealing perfect white teeth. "I'm Valentina, Sandro's sister." She sauntered forward, assessing me with cool calculation. "Though, I must say, you're not what I expected when he said he'd found a wife. We're not," I stammered, unsure how much she knew. "Real?" Her laugh was musical but sharp. "Of course it's not. My brother doesn't do relationships. He does arrangements." She circled me slowly. "The question is, what kind of arrangement do you think this is?" My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "It's just for tonight. To fool someone named Rossi." Valentina stopped in front of me, her perfectly manicured finger tapping her chin. "Interesting. And he brought you home." She leaned closer, her expensive perfume enveloping me. "Sandro never brings his women home." "I'm not his woman," I protested, though the words sounded weak even to my own ears. "No," her smile was knowing. "Then why are you looking at his office door like you're waiting for him to come back? Why haven't you run screaming into the night?" "Because I couldn't. Because of Emma. Because despite everything, some traitorous part of me was intrigued by Alessandro Castellano and the way he looked at me like I was precious and valuable instead of invisible." "Valentina," Sandro's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I don't recall inviting you here tonight." His sister straightened, unruffled by his cold tone. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd meet the mystery woman who has all your men whispering." She kissed his cheek, unfazed by his rigid posture. "She's pretty." Common, but pretty. I flinched at her casual cruelty. Sandro's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Olivia is my guest," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "You will show her respect." Valentina raised an eyebrow, something unspoken passing between the siblings. "Guest. Is that what we're calling it now?" She turned to me with a predatory smile. "Enjoy your visit, Olivia. My brother can be quite hospitable when it suits him." With that parting shot, she glided from the room, leaving behind a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I apologize for my sister," Sandro said, moving to my side. "Valentina can be protective." "She seemed more territorial than protective," I muttered before I could stop myself. To my surprise, Sandro laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features into something dangerously appealing. "An accurate assessment. My sister has been managing my household and social calendar since our parents died. She's unaccustomed to surprises." "Like fake wives?" His expression sobered. "Like real ones." The implication hung between us, heavy with possibility. I swallowed hard. "The situation with Rossi is escalating," he continued, gesturing for me to join him on a sleek leather sofa. "He's making inquiries about you already. My men intercepted 3 of his people attempting to follow us from the restaurant." Fear clawed at my throat. What does that mean for me? For Emma? Sandro's face hardened. "It means your safety is now my primary concern." He poured me a glass of water from a crystal carafe. "Rossi is desperate and therefore dangerous. Until I neutralize the threat, you and your daughter need protection." "Protection? You mean, like, bodyguards?" The absurdity of the situation hit me anew. 24 hours ago, I couldn't afford to fix my leaking faucet. Now a Mafia boss was offering me protection from his enemies. To start. He studied me with those penetrating eyes. "The safest option would be for you to stay here." "Here?" I practically choked on the water. "I can't just move in with you. I have a job. Emma has school. All of which can be arranged." He spoke as if relocating a single mother, and her child was no more complicated than ordering dinner. "Your position at Meridian Insurance is tenuous at best since the department downsizing announcement last week. As for Emma's education, there are excellent private schools nearby." Once again, I was stunned by the depth of his knowledge about my life. "How do you know all this?" Something unreadable flickered across his face. "Your application for emergency assistance with the Children's Dental Clinic 3 weeks ago. You listed your employment concerns." "You saw my application? How?" "I own the foundation that funds the clinic," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Your file crossed my desk. The implications spun through my mind like a kaleidoscope. "So, that night at the restaurant, you knew who I was before you sat down?" His expression remained impassive, but something like discomfort flashed in his eyes. "Yes." "You planned this whole thing?" Anger flared hot and bright in my chest. "Used me as some kind of prop in your Mafia power play?" "Not entirely." His jaw tightened. Rossi's appearance was unexpected. "But yes, I had intended to approach you." "Why?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "What could you possibly want from me?" Sandro stood in one fluid motion and crossed to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark lake. For a long moment he was silent, his broad shoulders taut beneath his tailored jacket. "Your file contained a photograph," he finally said, his voice lower, rougher. "When I saw it, I recognized you immediately." "Recognized me? That's impossible. We've never met." He turned, his expression inscrutable. "Not you, precisely, but your resemblance to someone I once knew is remarkable." Ice slid down my spine. "Who?" "My wife," he said simply. "My real wife, Sophia." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You're actually married?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I was. She died 6 years ago." The timeline hit me with stunning clarity. 6 years ago, when Emma was born. When I was struggling through pregnancy alone, this man was losing his wife. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. then frowned. But that doesn't explain why you'd want me to pretend the anniversary of her death was last week. He cut in, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of something raw. Rossi somehow learned of this and has been watching me, waiting for signs of weakness. Appearing with a new wife, especially one who bears such a striking resemblance to Sophia, sends a message that I've moved on, that I'm not vulnerable. So I'm just a body double? A ghost stand-in? The thought was both chilling and oddly disappointing. Sandro moved toward me with that predatory grace, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You're nothing like her," he said softly, his gaze traveling over my features. "Except in appearance. Sophia was gentle, sheltered, obedient. You have fire in your eyes, Olivia Reed, even when you're afraid." His hand rose to touch my cheek, and I should have pulled away. Should have been disgusted by this man who had manipulated me, who had built his life on violence and fear. Instead, I remained frozen, caught in the intensity of his gaze. "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now," he said, his thumb brushing across my lower lip. "We make our arrangement more permanent. At least until Rossi is no longer a threat." "Define permanent," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady despite his intoxicating proximity. "You and Emma move here, under my protection. You maintain the appearance of being my wife in public. In return, I ensure your financial security, your daughter's education, and your safety. And in private?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "In private, cara mia, we negotiate our own terms." My pulse raced traitorously. This is insane. "I don't know you. You're a criminal. And yet you haven't run." His observation hung between us, undeniable. "You haven't called the police. You're still here, considering my offer." He was right, and that terrified me more than anything else. What kind of mother was I, even contemplating an arrangement with a man like him? "Emma is all that matters to me," I said, my voice firmer now. "I won't expose her to danger or whatever business you're involved in." "Emma would want for nothing," he countered. "She would be protected, educated, cared for as if she were my own blood. My home has a separate wing where you both would live. Your own space, your own rules." "Until when? What's the endgame here, Sandro?" He stepped back slightly, giving me room to breathe. "Until Rossi is no longer a concern. 3 months, perhaps 4. And then what? We just go back to our old lives like none of this happened?" Something unreadable passed across his features. "If that's what you wish." Before I could respond, his phone vibrated again. This time his expression darkened as he read the message. "What is it?" I asked, alarmed by the sudden tension radiating from him. "Rossi's men," he said tersely. "They've been watching your apartment building." Fear clawed at my throat. "Emma is safe," he assured me. "My people intercepted them before they got near your floor, but this changes things." "How?" His expression was grim. "They know where you live, who you are. Rossi now believes you're my weakness, which makes you and Emma targets." He ran a hand through his immaculate hair, the first sign of genuine distress I'd seen from him. "I've already dispatched men to collect her and Mrs. Patel. They'll be brought here immediately." "Without my permission?" Anger flared, hot and sudden. "You can't just take my daughter. Would you prefer I left her there for Rossi's men to find?" His voice was sharp, but there was genuine concern beneath the harshness. "This isn't a game, Olivia. These men don't hesitate to use children as leverage." The reality of the situation crashed over me like a wave. In the span of a few hours, my quiet, struggling life had been shattered. Now my daughter was in danger because of a man I'd just met, because I looked like his dead wife, and he'd decided to use me in some criminal chess match. "This is your fault," I whispered, tears pricking at my eyes. "You dragged us into this." Something like guilt flashed across his face before his expression hardened again. "Yes," he admitted, "and now I'm going to fix it, but I need your cooperation. Do I have a choice?" The question wasn't entirely rhetorical. Sandro studied me for a long moment. "There's always a choice, Cara, but some are better than others." A buzzing sound interrupted us. Sandro checked a security panel on the wall. They're here. My heart leapt into my throat as I followed him to the entrance hall. The doors opened to reveal one of Sandro's men carrying a sleeping Emma, her small form bundled in her favorite unicorn blanket. Mrs. Patel followed, looking surprisingly unperturbed for a woman who had just been whisked away by Mafia henchmen in the middle of the night. "Olivia, dear," she exclaimed when she saw me, "your husband's men were so polite. And this house, it's like a palace." I stood frozen, unable to correct her misconception as Emma stirred in the bodyguard's arms. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her features until she saw me. "Mommy?" Her small voice broke something inside me. I rushed forward, taking her from the man's arms and holding her close, breathing in her familiar scent of baby shampoo and strawberry toothpaste. "It's okay, baby," I murmured into her hair. "Mommy's here." "Where are we?" she asked, rubbing her eyes as she looked around the grand entryway. Before I could answer, Sandro stepped forward, his entire demeanor transforming as he addressed my daughter. Gone was the dangerous predator, replaced by a gentle presence that still somehow commanded attention. "Hello, Emma," he said, his voice warm in a way I hadn't heard before. "My name is Sandro. You and your mother are going to be staying at my house for a little while." Emma studied him with the unfiltered curiosity only children possess. "Is this a castle?" Sandro's lips curved into a genuine smile that transformed his severe features. "Not quite. But there is a swimming pool and a room full of books and toys that I think you might enjoy." Emma's eyes widened. "A pool? Inside?" "And a garden maze outside," he added, as if offering a child a private playground was the most natural thing in the world. "Perhaps tomorrow you can explore it, if your mother agrees." Emma turned to me, excitement replacing her confusion. "Can we stay, Mommy? Please?" Over her head, Sandro's eyes met mine. Dark, intense, victorious. He knew he'd won. With a few simple words, he'd captivated my daughter just as effectively as he'd ensnared me. "Yes, sweetheart," I heard myself say, the words sealing my fate. "We're going to stay for a while." The morning light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a bedroom larger than my entire apartment. I blinked awake in a disoriented haze, my fingers clutching unfamiliar silk sheets. For one bewildering moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. Sandro, Rossi, the forced charade, the midnight evacuation of my daughter. I bolted upright, panic seizing my chest. "Emma? Your daughter is having breakfast in the garden pavilion," a feminine voice answered. "Mr. Castellano thought you might appreciate some rest." A petite woman stood by the doorway, her posture impeccable. In her pressed uniform, she looked like something out of a period drama about wealthy estates. "Who are you?" I asked, clutching the sheets closer. "Isabel, ma'am. I've been assigned as your personal assistant during your stay." Her expression remained professionally neutral, betraying nothing about what she might know of my unusual arrangement with her employer. "Where are my clothes?" I glanced down at the silk nightgown I definitely hadn't been wearing when I finally collapsed into bed after settling Emma into the adjoining room. "Your belongings are being collected from your apartment as we speak," Isabel replied, moving to open a massive walk-in closet. "In the meantime, Mr. Castellano had these delivered this morning." I slid from the bed and followed her, stopping short at the doorway. The closet was filled with clothing in my size, dresses, pants, blouses, shoes, all with designer labels I recognized but had never dreamed of owning. Tags still attached, prices that made me dizzy. "These are all for me?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "Yes, ma'am. And similar arrangements have been made for Emma." Isabel gestured to a section of smaller clothing. Mr. Castellano was quite specific about the selections, the intimacy of it. This man choosing clothing for my daughter and me, knowing our sizes, predicting our needs, sent a confusing shiver through me. It was both invasive and strangely thoughtful. "I can't accept all this," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew my position for negotiation was weak. Isabel's expression softened slightly. "If I may speak freely, ma'am?" I nodded. "In my 15 years with the Castellano family, I've never seen Mr. Castellano take such personal interest in a guest's comfort." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her uniform. "Whatever your arrangement with him, these gestures are not merely transactional. Before I could respond to this unsettling observation, a soft knock came at the bedroom door. Isabel moved swiftly to answer it, exchanging quiet words with someone outside before returning. "Mr. Castellano requests your presence for breakfast once you're dressed," she said. "Shall I help you select something?" 20 minutes later, dressed in a simple but obviously expensive sundress that fit as though it had been tailored specifically for me, I followed Isabel through the sprawling mansion. Every room we passed spoke of extraordinary wealth tempered by masculine restraint. Leather, glass, and steel dominating the color palette, with occasional bursts of vibrant art serving as focal points. We stepped onto a stone terrace overlooking Lake Michigan, its waters glittering in the morning sunlight. A pavilion stood at the edge of an immaculately landscaped garden, and there, like a scene from someone else's life, sat Sandro and Emma. My daughter was perched on a chair, piled with cushions to boost her height, animatedly explaining something while Sandro listened with an attentiveness I'd rarely seen adults show children. What struck me most wasn't the picturesque setting or the platters of food that could feed a small army. It was how at ease Emma seemed, as though breakfasting with a dangerous criminal was perfectly normal. "Mommy," she spotted me and waved enthusiastically. "Sandro has chocolate chip pancakes and a pool, and he said I can have swimming lessons." I approached cautiously, hyper-aware of Sandro rising to his feet as I neared. In the morning light, wearing a casual button-down with the sleeves rolled to expose muscular forearms, he looked less like a fearsome Mafia boss and more like the wealthy businessman he pretended to be. "Good morning, Kara," he said, pulling out a chair for me. The endearment rolled off his tongue so naturally it was easy to forget it was part of our charade. "Did you sleep well?" "As well as could be expected, considering the circumstances," I answered quietly, conscious of Emma's attentive ears. Sandro's eyes, warm amber in the sunlight rather than the cold espresso of last night, studied my face with unsettling intensity. "The circumstances will improve," he promised, his voice pitched for my ears only. "You have my word." A server appeared silently with coffee, pouring a cup without asking how I took it. Cream. 1 sugar. Exactly right. Another reminder of how thoroughly Sandro had investigated my life. "Emma was just telling me about her interest in swimming," he continued at normal volume, resuming his seat. "I've arranged for an instructor to assess her skills this afternoon, if that's acceptable to you." The calculated courtesy, asking permission while simultaneously informing me the arrangements were already made, wasn't lost on me. "That's very thoughtful," I said carefully. "But we can't impose—" "It's no imposition," he cut in smoothly. "The pool sits unused most days. It would be my pleasure to see it enjoyed." Emma bounced in her seat. "Please, Mommy. I've always wanted lessons." I knew that all too well. The YMCA program I couldn't afford. The disappointment in her eyes when I'd explained we needed to wait until next year. Again. "All right," I conceded, rewarded by Emma's brilliant smile. "But we should discuss expectations," I added, looking pointedly at Sandro, "about how long we're staying, what this arrangement entails." "After breakfast," he agreed, his gaze flickering to Emma. "Perhaps your daughter would enjoy exploring the garden with Isabel while we talk." Emma, already halfway through demolishing a stack of pancakes, looked up eagerly. "Is there really a maze?" Sandro nodded, his expression softening in a way that seemed genuine. "And a fountain in the center with fish you can feed." That was all the convincing Emma needed. Once she'd finished eating, Isabel appeared as if summoned telepathically to escort her on the promised garden adventure, complete with a small bag of fish food. When we were alone, Sandro refilled my coffee cup, the domestic gesture at odds with the dangerous man I knew him to be. "You have questions," he said simply. "About 1,000, I replied, setting down my fork. "Starting with how long you expect this charade to continue." "Until Rossi is no longer a threat," he said, the same answer as last night. "My men are working to contain the situation, but these things require delicacy. And in the meantime, what exactly am I supposed to be doing? Playing house? Pretending to be your dead wife's replacement?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You are not a replacement," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "You are under my protection because I put you in danger. The role of wife is merely the most efficient cover." For what? What am I covering? Sandro stood, pacing to the edge of the pavilion. With his back to me, silhouetted against the lake, he cut an imposing figure despite the casual clothing. 6 years ago, my wife was killed, he said abruptly. Not by a rival or an enemy, but by a drunk driver, the most mundane death imaginable for the wife of a man in my position. I remained silent, sensing there was more to this story than he'd shared last night. What few people know, he continued, is that she was pregnant at the time. 7 months. A daughter. The breath caught in my throat. I'm sorry, I whispered, the inadequacy of the words hanging between us. He turned, his expression carved from stone. Rossi learned of this recently, on the anniversary of their deaths. He approached me with photos of their graves, speaking of how terrible it would be to lose more family members, his hands clenched at his sides. It was a threat, thinly veiled. The brutality of using a man's dead wife and unborn child as leverage made me physically ill. That's monstrous. That is business, in Rossi's world. Sandro's voice was flat, a world I've worked to evolve beyond, though few believe that possible. And where do I fit into this? Because I look like her? He moved back to the table, his movements fluid despite the tension radiating from him. Initially, yes. Your resemblance to Sophia provided an opportunity to show Rossi I had moved on, that his knowledge of my past gave him no power over me. He sat, closer than before. But now that he's seen you, identified you, the situation has evolved. Into what, exactly? Sandro's gaze was penetrating, assessing. Into something more complex. Rossi believes you're important to me. That makes you both a target and an asset. An asset, I repeated flatly. That's what I am to you? Something flickered across his features. Frustration, perhaps, or something more complicated. What you are to me, he said carefully, is not so easily defined. Before I could push for clarification, his phone buzzed. He checked it with a slight frown before returning his attention to me. My security team has finished sweeping your apartment, he said. Most of your belongings are being packed and brought here. However, they discovered surveillance equipment installed in your living room and bedroom. Horror crawled up my spine. Cameras? In my home? Where my daughter lives. Audio only, he said, though this did little to quell my revulsion. Installed within the last 24 hours, according to my tech expert. Rossi's work, undoubtedly. Nausea rolled through me as I imagined strangers listening to my private conversations with Emma, to our bedtime stories and morning routines. How did they get in? I always double-lock the door. Your building's security is... He paused diplomatically. Inadequate. The devices have been removed and disabled. But this confirms what I suspected. You cannot return there. The reality of my situation crashed over me anew. My home, my jobs, my carefully constructed life, all compromised because I'd caught the attention of Alessandro Castellano. What about work? I asked, grasping for some semblance of normalcy. I have responsibilities, bills to pay, a life to maintain. Your financial obligations have been settled, he said matter-of-factly. Your position at Meridian was already precarious, as we discussed. As for the Blue Orchid, I've arranged a leave of absence for family reasons. Anger flared hot in my chest. You had no right. You can't just take over my life without... Without what? He interrupted, his voice soft but unyielding. Without your permission? The moment Rossi saw you at my table, certain wheels were set in motion that cannot be reversed. I'm merely ensuring you and Emma land safely when those wheels inevitably crush the life you knew. His bluntness stunned me into momentary silence. When I found my voice again, it emerged smaller than I'd intended. So, what happens now? I just live here indefinitely, pretend to be your wife when necessary? For now, yes. His expression softened fractionally. Is that really so terrible, Kara? Your daughter's safe and receiving opportunities you've worked so hard to provide? Financial security? Protection? It's a gilded cage, I said quietly. No matter how beautiful, it's still captivity. Then consider it temporary sanctuary, he countered. One that requires certain performances when we're in public. What kind of performances? Something darkened in his gaze. Nothing beyond what you're comfortable with. Hand-holding. The occasional display of affection. The appearance of a couple still in the honeymoon phase of marriage. The thought of Sandro's hands on me, even in the most innocent context, sent a forbidden heat coursing through my veins. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Beyond sending a message to Rossi, he studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Peace of mind, he finally said, knowing I've protected the innocent people I dragged into my world. There was more to it than that. I could sense it in the intensity of his gaze, the careful distance he maintained despite his words of closeness. But before I could press further, a commotion from the garden caught our attention. Emma came racing toward us, her face flushed with excitement, Isabel following at a more dignified pace. "Mommy, there are turtles in the fountain!" she exclaimed, breathless. "Can I keep one, please?" Sandro laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features. "The turtles live there, Piccola, but you can visit them whenever you want." Emma turned her pleading eyes on him. "Promise? Every day?" "Every day," he confirmed, with a solemnity usually reserved for business deals. "We can even name them if you'd like." My daughter beamed at him with unguarded trust that made my heart ache. How quickly she'd accepted this stranger into her world, how easily she'd adapted to our sudden relocation. Children were resilient, yes, but I wondered what would happen when this temporary arrangement inevitably ended. "Isabel will show you to your rooms in the East Wing," Sandro said, rising from the table. "They've been prepared for a longer stay, with everything you might need. If anything is missing, you need only ask." "The East Wing?" I questioned. "Where will you be?" Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "The master suite is in the West Wing. We may be playing at marriage, Cara, but I would not presume to share your space." He paused, then added with deliberate emphasis, "Unless invited." Heat rushed to my cheeks at the implication. "That won't be necessary." His smile was knowing, almost predatory. "As you wish." For the next 3 days, Sandro maintained a respectful distance. I glimpsed him occasionally, in his office on video calls, in the garden on his phone, once in the library reading something in what looked like Italian. But he seemed determined to give Emma and me space to adjust, to explore our new temporary home without his looming presence. Emma, predictably, was in heaven. Between swimming lessons with a former Olympic athlete, just a friend, Sandro had explained casually, as if everyone had gold medalists in their social circle. The garden maze, the media room with every Disney movie ever made, and Isabel's seemingly unlimited patience for 6-year-old questions. My daughter had never been happier. I, meanwhile, felt increasingly unsettled, not by fear or discomfort. The opposite, in fact. The ease with which I was adapting to this luxury, this protection, terrified me. Each morning, I woke determined to maintain my guard, to remember that none of this was real or sustainable. By evening, watching Emma laugh and thrive, I found my resolve weakening. On the 4th night, I tucked Emma into her princess bed, an actual canopy bed that had appeared on our 2nd day, installed while we were swimming, her eyelids already heavy after a full day of activity. "Mommy," she murmured sleepily, "is Sandro going to be my new daddy?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" She yawned, snuggling deeper under the covers. "Because we live in his house, and he looks at you the way Prince Eric looks at Ariel." "That's just a movie, baby," I said, smoothing her hair. "Real life is more complicated, but we're staying here, right? I like it here." The simple happiness in her voice made my throat tight. "For now, yes. But it's just temporary." "Why?" Her brow furrowed. "Don't you like Sandro?" How could I explain to a 6-year-old that the man who had given her everything she'd ever wanted in the span of 4 days was a criminal who had dragged us into a dangerous game? That we were playing pretend for reasons she couldn't understand? It's complicated, Emma. Grown-up complicated. She seemed to accept this, her eyes drifting closed. "He makes you smile," she murmured, already half asleep. "You never smiled at home." The observation, so simple, so devastatingly accurate, haunted me as I left her room. Had I been so transparently unhappy in our previous life that even my child had noticed? Had I been so focused on survival that I'd forgotten how to smile? Lost in these thoughts, I didn't notice Sandro until I nearly collided with him in the hallway outside Emma's room. He steadied me with hands on my shoulders, his touch sending unwelcome heat through my body. "Forgive me," he said, releasing me immediately when he felt me tense. "I was coming to say goodnight to Emma." The domesticity of the statement struck me. "You do that?" "When invited," he replied, something guarded in his expression. "She asked me earlier if I would check for monsters under her bed. Apparently, I have a reputation for being particularly effective against closet-dwelling creatures." I couldn't help but smile at the image of this dangerous man on his knees, peering under a little girl's bed for imaginary monsters. "She's already asleep." Disappointment flickered across his features before he masked it. "Another time, then." "She asked if you were going to be her new daddy," I blurted, needing him to understand the dangerous territory we were entering. This arrangement, it's confusing for her. Something complicated passed behind his eyes. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth, that it's temporary." "Is it?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us had dared voice. "Of course it is," I said, but the words lacked conviction even to my own ears. "Once this situation with Rossi is resolved, Emma and I will return to our normal lives." Sandro stepped closer, his proximity making it difficult to think clearly. "And if I offered you a different option?" "What option?" I breathed, suddenly aware of how alone we were in the dimly lit hallway. "Stay," he said simply. "Not as a charade or for protection. Not because you resemble someone from my past. Stay because Emma flourishes here. Because you deserve security and peace." His hand rose to brush a strand of hair from my face, the touch feather-light. "Because there's something between us that we both feel, whether we acknowledge it or not." My heart pounded against my ribs. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he countered. "I know you've sacrificed everything for your daughter. I know you worked 2 jobs without complaint. I know you applied for dental assistance for Emma, but nothing for yourself, despite the obvious pain you've been in when you eat cold foods." I flinched at the accuracy of his observation, the broken molar I'd been ignoring for months because I couldn't afford the treatment. "I know," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "that you tremble when I'm near you, and it's not from fear alone." Heat bloomed in my cheeks. "That's presumptuous. Is it?" His fingers traced the line of my jaw, featherlight but sending electricity through my veins. "Tell me you feel nothing, and I'll never touch you again." I should have stepped back, should have firmly established boundaries. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my body betraying me as it had from the first moment I saw him. "This is a mistake," I whispered, even as my eyes dropped to his mouth. "Perhaps," he agreed, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "But some mistakes are worth making." When his lips finally met mine, the contact was gentle, questioning rather than demanding. It was nothing like I'd imagined kissing Alessandro Castellano would be. Instead of domination, there was a restrained hunger that made my knees weak. I should have pulled away. Instead, my hand slid up his chest to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath expensive fabric. His arms encircled my waist, drawing me closer as the kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and desperate. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, reality crashed back like a cold wave. I stepped back, my fingers rising to my lips as though I could erase what had just happened. "I can't do this," I said, my voice unsteady. This isn't real," he finished, his eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "That felt very real to me, cara mia." "You're a criminal," I reminded him, though the accusation sounded weak even to my own ears. "Your world is dangerous. Temporary protection is one thing, but anything more would put Emma at risk." Something like pain flashed across his features. "You think I would allow harm to come to her? To either of you?" "Intentions aren't guarantees," I countered. "You yourself said Rossi targeted me because he thought I was important to you. Imagine if I actually was." Sandro's jaw tightened. So you would deny what's between us because of what I am? Because of what your life would mean for my daughter, I corrected. She deserves stability, safety. And you think you can provide that in your apartment with broken locks and neighbors who deal drugs? His voice sharpened with frustration. You think your minimum wage jobs and constant struggle is safer than what I offer? The harsh truth of his words stung. At least there. I'm in control of our lives. Are you? His laugh was without humor. Control is an illusion for people like you, Olivia. One medical emergency, one lost job, one eviction notice away from disaster. Here, with me, you would never know that fear again. At what cost? I demanded. My autonomy? My independence? Sandro stepped closer, his expression intense. I'm not asking you to surrender those things. I'm offering you a choice. Continue fighting a battle you can't win alone, or accept that sometimes strength means allowing yourself to be supported. His words echoed in my mind as I lay awake that night, staring at the ornate ceiling of my borrowed bedroom. Sometimes strength means allowing yourself to be supported. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as manipulation. A powerful man using honeyed words to get what he wanted, but there had been raw honesty in his eyes. A vulnerability at odds with the dangerous persona he presented to the world. And then there was that kiss. The memory of it burned through me. Impossible to ignore. I'd been kissed before, of course. Fumbling teenage experiences. Emma's father with his performative passion that never quite reached his eyes. A handful of forgettable dates in the years since. Nothing had prepared me for the consuming heat of Sandro's mouth on mine. The controlled power in his touch that promised both tenderness and possession. I turned restlessly, punching my pillow into submission. This attraction was inconvenient at best, dangerous at worst. I had Emma to think about, her safety, her future, her emotional well-being. Getting involved with Sandro would only complicate an already impossible situation. Yet Emma's words haunted me too. You never smiled at home. Had I been so worn down by constant struggle that I'd forgotten joy? Had my determination to provide for my daughter robbed us both of happiness in the process? Sleep finally claimed me in the early hours, my dreams filled with Sandro's dark eyes and gentle hands. Morning brought no clarity, only a resolve to maintain boundaries I'd already allowed to crumble. I braced myself for awkwardness at breakfast, but Sandro was nowhere to be found. Mr. Castellano had early business in the city, Isabel informed me as she poured my coffee. He asked me to tell you he'll return this evening and hopes you and Emma will join him for dinner. The reprieve should have been welcome, but I felt an inexplicable disappointment. I busied myself with Emma, who was eagerly anticipating her third swimming lesson. Watching her splash confidently under her instructor's guidance, I marveled at how quickly she'd adapted to our new circumstances. Children were resilient, yes. But I worried about what would happen when this interlude inevitably ended. How could I take her back to our cramped apartment after she'd experienced all this? How could I explain that the man she was growing attached to, the man who checked for monsters and named turtles with her, wouldn't be part of our lives anymore? After lunch, while Emma napped, I wandered through Sandro's home, trying to reconcile the space with the man. The library revealed shelves of classic literature, alongside business texts and historical biographies, many in Italian. In a smaller sitting room, I discovered photographs, Sandro with an older couple who shared his eyes, a younger Sandro with a grinning Valentina, both in graduation robes, no photographs of Sophia, no evidence of the wife whose resemblance to me had started this whole charade. I was studying a chessboard left mid-game when a voice startled me. He always plays white, opens with the same move every time. I turned to find Valentina leaning against the doorframe, impeccably dressed as before. Her expression was less openly hostile today, though wariness remained in her dark eyes. I don't play, I said, stepping away from the board. She entered the room with languid grace, circling the chessboard like a predator. You've managed to establish quite a presence in my brother's home rather quickly. Not by choice, I reminded her. This arrangement was Sandro's idea. Ah, yes. The convenient charade, her perfectly manicured finger traced the carved marble of a knight. Except Sandro doesn't do anything without multiple purposes. A wife who looks like Sophia might fool Rossi. But there's more to it. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Valentina studied me with eyes so similar to her brother's, it was unsettling. My brother hasn't allowed a woman to spend the night in this house since Sophia died. Not one. And suddenly, you and your daughter are installed in the East Wing with wardrobes full of designer clothes and staff at your disposal. For protection. He has secure properties across the city for protection, she cut in. Penthouses with better security than the Federal Reserve. Yet he brings you here, to our family home. The implication hung between us, too significant to ignore. I don't understand what you're suggesting. Valentina moved closer, her gaze clinical as it swept over me. I'm suggesting, Olivia Reed, that you be very careful. My brother is not a man who forms attachments easily. But when he does, she shook her head slightly, he doesn't let go. Ever. A chill ran down my spine. Is that a threat? A warning, she corrected. From someone who knows him better than anyone. Whatever game you think you're playing, I'm not playing any game, I interrupted, anger flaring. Your brother dragged me and my daughter into his dangerous world without my consent. I'm just trying to keep Emma safe until this situation is resolved. Something in Valentina's expression shifted, softened fractionally. Your daughter. The one thing I didn't anticipate, she sighed, suddenly looking more human than the calculating predator I'd first encountered. He was going to be a father. Did he tell you that? I nodded, remembering Sandro's revelation about his pregnant wife. A daughter. Valentina continued, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. They'd already named her Allegra, Joy. Her gaze drifted to the window, toward the garden where Emma had been playing earlier. When we lost them both, something in Sandro broke. The brother I knew disappeared, replaced by someone colder, more calculating. I'm sorry, I said softly, meaning it despite my wariness of this woman. So am I. Her focus returned to me, sharp and assessing, but for the first time in 6 years, I've seen glimpses of the old Sandro, when he watches your daughter, when he speaks of you. Uneasiness twisted in my stomach. I can't be a replacement for what he lost. No, she agreed, surprising me. And if that's all you were, I would have already ensured your departure. The threat was delivered so casually it took me a moment to register. But I suspect you're something else entirely to him. What? A second chance. Valentina stepped back, her moment of vulnerability disappearing behind her polished facade. The question is whether you're worthy of it. Before I could respond, her phone chimed. She checked it, her expression darkening instantly. I need to find my brother, immediately. He's in the city, I said, alarmed by the sudden tension in her posture. Business meetings, Isabel said. Valentina's laugh was sharp, without humor. Is that what he told you? How convenient. She stalked toward the door, then paused. Stay inside. Keep your daughter close. Tell security if anyone approaches who isn't family. What's happening? Fear clawed at my throat. Is it Rossi? Always, she confirmed grimly. But this time, my idiot brother has gone to meet him alone. Her gaze pinned me. Apparently, Rossi requested it, claimed he had information about you that Sandro would want to hear privately. Ice slid down my spine. Information about me? There's nothing to know. Something like pity crossed Valentina's features. Everyone has secrets, Olivia Reed. Even those who think they don't. With that cryptic statement, she was gone, leaving me with a growing sense of dread. What could Rossi possibly know about me that would lure Sandro into meeting him alone? My life before Sandro had been painfully ordinary, struggling single mother, overworked and underpaid. Nothing that would interest a man like Franco Rossi. Unless a memory surfaced, one I'd spent years trying to forget. Emma's father hadn't simply abandoned us when I told him I was pregnant. There had been more to the story, a darkness I'd never shared with anyone, not even in Emma's birth documentation. Could Rossi have somehow uncovered that buried history? The very thought made me physically ill. I rushed to find Emma, needing to assure myself she was safe. I found her with Isabel in the playroom, happily building with blocks that probably cost more than our monthly rent. "Mommy, look, I made Sandro's house," she exclaimed, pointing to an impressive structure that did indeed resemble the mansion's architecture. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile despite my mounting anxiety. "Isabel, may I speak with you for a moment?" In the hallway, I kept my voice low. Valentina seemed concerned about something involving Sandro and Rossi. "Do you know what's happening?" Isabel's professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing genuine worry. "Mr. Castellano left explicit instructions that you and Emma were to remain inside today, with enhanced security." She hesitated. "Beyond that, I'm not privy to the details." "But something's wrong," I pressed. "I need to know if Emma's in danger." "The security team has locked down the property," she assured me. "No one enters without Mr. Castellano's direct authorization. You're as safe here as anywhere in the city." It wasn't entirely reassuring, but I had little choice but to accept it. I returned to Emma, trying to maintain a calm facade while my mind raced with scenarios, each worse than the last. Hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I checked my phone compulsively, though I had no messages from Sandro. Why would I? Our relationship, such as it was, hardly warranted regular check-ins. Still, as afternoon stretched into evening with no word, my concern deepened to something more urgent. Emma sensed my distraction during dinner, picking at her food with unusual quietness. "Is Sandro coming back?" she finally asked. "Of course he is, sweetheart. This is his home." "But you're worried," she said, her perception sometimes startling for a 6-year-old. "I can tell." I forced a reassuring smile. "Grown-ups worry about silly things sometimes. Nothing for you to be concerned about." After putting Emma to bed, I paced my room like a caged animal. The mansion suddenly felt too large, too empty, the silence oppressive. Against my better judgment, I found myself drawn to Sandro's study. The one room Isabel had indicated was strictly private. The door was unlocked. I hesitated on the threshold, knowing I was crossing a line but unable to stop myself. Inside, the space was exactly what I would have expected. Masculine, elegant, dominated by a massive desk of dark wood. Bookcases lined one wall, a bar cart occupied another. The third wall held something unexpected. A massive corkboard covered with papers, photographs, and red string connecting various elements. I moved closer, breath catching as I recognized Franco Rossi's face in several photos. Documents in Italian covered portions of the board, along with what appeared to be shipping manifests and financial records. At the center was something that made my blood run cold, a photograph of me, taken outside my apartment building months ago, judging by my winter coat. Next to it, a school picture of Emma I recognized from last year. He'd been watching us long before our encounter at the restaurant. Trembling, I stepped back, knocking into the desk. Papers scattered to the floor, and as I bent to collect them, a familiar name jumped out at me. Jason Miller, Emma's father. My hands shook as I gathered the documents, scanning their contents with growing horror. Police reports, financial transactions, a mugshot, and most damning of all, a paternity test dated just 3 days ago, confirming Jason as Emma's biological father. Sandro had known, perhaps not initially, but he'd discovered the connection between Emma's father and Rossi's organization. Jason hadn't just abandoned us, he'd been working for Rossi all along. The low-level dealer I'd briefly dated had apparently risen through the ranks to become one of Rossi's lieutenants. And now Sandro had gone to meet with them, armed with this knowledge. Finding anything interesting, I whirled around to find Valentina in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "How long has Sandro known about Emma's father?" I demanded, too distraught for pretense. "Since yesterday," she answered, entering the room with measured steps. "One of our informants recognized your photo, made the connection to Miller. And Sandro went to confront them, alone?" Panic clawed at my throat. "That's suicide. My brother rarely acts without calculation," Valentina said, though concern shadowed her eyes. "But where you're concerned, his judgment has been compromised." "We have to help him," I insisted, moving toward the door. "Call your men, your security, whatever criminal empire resources you have." Valentina's laugh stopped me. "You think I haven't tried?" Sandro deliberately circumvented his security detail. "None of our usual properties are in use. He's gone dark intentionally." She studied me with new interest. Your concern seems genuine. Of course it's genuine. He's in danger because of me, because of my connection to— I couldn't bring myself to say it— to Emma's father. A connection you never disclosed, she noted, her tone sharpening. Even when you knew Rossi was targeting you specifically, shame and defiance warred within me. I didn't know Jason worked for Rossi. He was just a dealer when I knew him, small time. When I got pregnant, he disappeared. I never saw him again. Yet you recognized his name on those documents, she pressed. You knew something was wrong with him, beyond simple abandonment. I sank into Sandro's desk chair, the fight draining out of me. The night I told him I was pregnant, I found drugs in his apartment, not marijuana or party pills. Serious weight, packaged for distribution. When I confronted him, I swallowed hard. The memory still painful. He got violent. Said I was never to tell anyone about what I'd seen, or he'd make sure I regretted it. Valentina's expression softened fractionally. And you never reported this? To who? The police who never came when I called about break-ins at my apartment? The system that had failed me my entire life? I shook my head bitterly. I changed my phone number, moved apartments, cut all ties with anyone who knew him. I was just grateful he never came looking for us. Until now, Valentina said quietly. Rossi must have connected the dots somehow. And Sandro walked right into it. Fear constricted my chest. We have to find him. Before Valentina could respond, her phone rang. She answered immediately, her posture stiffening as she listened. Where? She demanded. Condition? Another pause. Lock it down. No one in or out. We're on our way. She ended the call, already moving toward the door. They found him. Hospital on the north side, private entrance. He's alive, but that's all I know. I was on my feet instantly. I'm coming with you. Your daughter will be safe with Isabel, I said firmly. I'm not asking permission, Valentina. Something like respect flickered in her eyes. Perhaps I underestimated you, Olivia Reed. She gestured toward the door. The car leaves in 3 minutes. Don't make me wait. The drive to the hospital passed in tense silence, the city lights blurring outside the window as Valentina's driver pushed well beyond legal speed limits. My mind raced with terrible possibilities. Sandro broken, bleeding, dying because of my past, because of a connection I should have disclosed. The hospital's private entrance was guarded by men I recognized from Sandro's security team. They nodded to Valentina with deference, their expressions grim. A white-coated doctor met us in a pristine corridor, speaking rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. Valentina's face remained impassive, but I caught the slight tremor in her clasped hands. How bad? I asked when the doctor finished his report. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, concussion, multiple lacerations, she translated clinically, though her voice wavered slightly. He was conscious when they found him, which is promising. Can I see him? Valentina studied me for a long moment. Why? What is he to you, really? This man you barely know, whose world terrifies you, whose life goes against everything you claim to value. The question pierced through my defenses, demanding an honesty I'd been avoiding. What was Sandro to me? Protector? Captor? Temptation? Something more profound I dared not name? He's someone who checked under my daughter's bed for monsters, I said simply. Someone who remembers how I take my coffee. Someone who looks at me and actually sees me. My voice broke slightly. And he's hurt because of me. Something in Valentina's expression shifted, softened. Room 312, she said after a moment. I'll give you a few minutes before I go in. The private room was dimly lit, monitors beeping steadily beside the bed where Sandro lay. I paused in the doorway, heart constricting at the sight of him. His imposing presence was diminished by the hospital setting, his olive skin pale against white sheets, dark bruises blooming along one side of his face. Bandages wrapped his torso, visible above the blanket pulled to his waist. I approached quietly, not wanting to wake him if he was sleeping. His eyes opened at my footsteps, however, still sharp and alert despite the pain medication I was certain coursed through his system. Olivia. My name emerged as little more than a whisper from his split lip. You idiot, I said, tears threatening despite my best efforts. What were you thinking? Going alone? A ghost of his usual smile curved his mouth. Not the bedside manner I was hoping for, Kara. I sank into the chair beside his bed, fighting the urge to touch him, to reassure myself he was really alive. Valentina told me what happened, about Emma's father. Sandro's expression darkened. Miller works for Rossi, has for years, specializes in particular kinds of enforcement. The euphemism wasn't lost on me. Enforcer meant violence, brutality. The man I'd once thought I loved, the father of my child, was a professional thug for a monster like Rossi. I didn't know, I whispered, needing him to believe me. When I knew Jason, he was just a small-time dealer. I swear, if I'd known he was connected to Rossi. I know. Sandro's hand moved across the blanket, finding mine. His grip was weaker than usual, but still warm, still grounding. Your face when you saw Rossi at the restaurant. That wasn't recognition. You had no idea. Relief flooded me at his trust. So simple and complete. What happened today? Why did you go alone? Pain flickered across his features as he shifted position. Rossi contacted me directly, said he had information about your past that I should hear privately. Professional courtesy, he called it. Sandro's laugh was bitter, ending in a grimace. I suspected a trap, of course, but I needed to know what he knew about you. So you sacrificed your safety for information about me? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. That's insane. That's business, he countered. Information is power. I needed to know what I was dealing with. And now you do, I said quietly. You know Emma's father works for your enemy. Sandro's gaze was steady, penetrating despite his weakened state. I know the man who contributed DNA to creating Emma is a criminal of the worst kind. That doesn't make him her father. His hand tightened around mine. A father protects, provides, loves. He did none of these things. The simple truth of his words made my throat tight with emotion. What happens now? Rossi knows your weakness. He knows how to hurt you through me. Sandro's eyes darkened at my words. My weakness, he repeated, his voice low. Is that what you think you are to me? I glanced at his battered body, the evidence of violence he'd endured because of his connection to me. The facts speak for themselves. Rossi used me to lure you into a trap. Rossi miscalculated, he said with quiet conviction. He believes caring for someone makes you vulnerable. He doesn't understand it can also make you more dangerous. A chill ran through me at the controlled fury beneath his words. Even injured, Sandro radiated lethal intent. What did they do to you? I asked, unable to stop myself from reaching out to touch the bruise darkening his cheekbone. He captured my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent heat spiraling through me. Nothing that won't heal, he evaded. Sandro. Miller was there, he interrupted, watching me closely for my reaction. Rossi's right hand now, apparently. He confirmed Emma is his biological daughter. My stomach twisted. Does he want to see her? No. The single word carried relief and renewed anger simultaneously. He expressed no interest in Emma beyond her potential usefulness as leverage. Against me, against you. His jaw tightened visibly. He will never come near her. I give you my word. The fierce protection in his voice made my heart ache. Thank you. Sandro shifted, wincing slightly as he sat straighter. You should return to the house. Emma will worry if she wakes and you're not there. I'm not leaving you, I said firmly, surprising myself with the vehemence in my tone. Something softened in his gaze. Stubborn woman, he murmured. But the fondness in his voice robbed the words of any criticism. The door opened before I could respond, revealing Valentina, along with two men I recognized from Sandro's security detail. The doctor says you can be moved to the house by morning, Valentina informed her brother, her clinical tone belied by the relief evident in her eyes. I've arranged for private nursing staff. Sandro nodded, his expression shifting seamlessly into the commanding presence I'd first encountered at the restaurant. Even in a hospital bed, he exuded authority. Rossi will be watching the house, he said. Double the perimeter security. No one enters or leaves without my direct authorization. Already done, Valentina confirmed. And the other matter? Her gaze slid meaningfully to me. Is being handled, Sandro replied cryptically. Have Paolo bring the car for Olivia. She needs to return to Emma. I started to protest, but Valentina was already issuing instructions to one of the men. Sandro's hand squeezed mine gently. Go to our daughter, he said quietly, the possessive pronoun sending a jolt through me. I'll be home tomorrow. Our daughter. The casual claim should have alarmed me. Instead, it felt strangely right, as though he'd been part of our lives far longer than the handful of days since our first meeting. Promise me you won't do anything reckless, I urged, reluctant to leave despite my concern for Emma. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Define reckless. Sandro, I promise I will come home to you, he said, his tone serious now. Both of you. That's the only promise that matters. Valentina cleared her throat pointedly from the doorway. I rose reluctantly, my hand lingering in Sandro's until the last possible moment before I pulled away. Be safe, I whispered, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead before I could question the impulse. His eyes darkened with an emotion too complex to name. Always. The drive back to Sandro's mansion, our temporary home, I reminded myself firmly, passed in a blur of city lights and jumbled thoughts. The revelation about Jason Miller, Emma's biological father, had shaken me more than I wanted to admit, not because I harbored any lingering feelings for him, but because his connection to Rossi created a danger I'd never anticipated. And then there was Sandro, wounded because of me, yet still radiating that unshakable strength. His promise to come home to us echoed in my mind, along with that casual claim, our daughter. As though Emma was already his in some way that transcended blood or legal documentation. Most unsettling of all was how right it had felt. How natural. As if the three of us had somehow formed a family unit in the space of less than a week. Isabel was waiting when I arrived, her usual composure slightly frayed around the edges. Emma's still sleeping, she assured me. I've been checking on her every half hour as instructed. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for her steadying presence. And Mr. Castellano, have you heard anything? Ms. Valentina called ahead. Medical staff are preparing the East Wing suite for his return tomorrow morning. She hesitated, then added, the security protocols have been enhanced. You'll notice more personnel on the grounds. I nodded, too exhausted to question the necessity. I think I'll just check on Emma and then try to get some sleep. My daughter was indeed sleeping peacefully, her stuffed unicorn clutched tightly against her chest, oblivious to the dangerous complications swirling around her. I brushed the hair from her forehead, overwhelmed by love and fierce protectiveness. I would do anything to keep her safe, even align myself with a man like Sandro Castellano. Sleep proved elusive despite my exhaustion. I tossed restlessly, my mind replaying fragments of conversation, searching for solutions to a situation that seemed increasingly impossible. Dawn was breaking when I finally drifted off, only to be awakened what felt like minutes later by Emma bouncing onto my bed. Mommy! Sandro's home, and he brought me a puppy! I bolted upright, certain I'd misheard. A what? A puppy! Emma's face was alight with excitement. He's tiny and fluffy, and his name is Cosimo, and he's downstairs right now with Sandro. I scrambled out of bed, hastily pulling on a robe over my nightgown. Sweetheart, are you sure? Mr. Castellano was away. He wasn't supposed to be back until later. He's in the garden, she insisted, tugging at my hand. Come see. I followed her downstairs, bewildered and concerned. Sandro should still be in the hospital, recovering from serious injuries. Yet when we stepped onto the terrace, there he was, seated at the breakfast table as though nothing had happened, a tiny ball of white fluff cradled in one arm while he read something on his tablet. He looked up as we approached, and my breath caught at the transformation. Gone was the pale, battered man I'd left in the hospital bed. This Sandro appeared completely recovered, clean-shaven, impeccably dressed in casual attire that still managed to look expensive, no visible bruises marring his face. Good morning, Cara. He greeted me with that slight smile that never failed to quicken my pulse. I hope you don't mind the early homecoming. The hospital environment was restrictive. "You're supposed to be recovering," I managed, staring in disbelief. "And you brought a dog?" "Puppy," he corrected, lifting the tiny creature for my inspection. "Maltese, hypoallergenic, excellent temperament for children." Emma reached for the puppy with reverent hands, her expression one of pure joy when Sandro carefully transferred the animal to her arms. "Can we really keep him, Mommy, please?" I fixed Sandro with an accusatory glare, which he met with unrepentant calm. "Perhaps you should have consulted me before making such a significant decision." "Perhaps," he agreed mildly. "But Emma mentioned wanting a dog 3 days ago. I thought it might provide comfort during a transitional period. The implication that our lives were about to change again wasn't lost on me." "Emma, why don't you take Cosimo to show Isabel? I need to speak with Sandro privately." My daughter nodded, already completely enamored with the puppy, and skipped back into the house. The moment she was out of earshot, I rounded on Sandro. "You can't just make unilateral decisions about pets without consulting me. And what are you doing out of the hospital? You had a punctured lung less than 12 hours ago." "I have excellent medical care," he replied, gesturing to a chair beside him. "Please sit. Your coffee is getting cold." I remained standing, hands on hips. "Don't change the subject. You were seriously injured. The doctor said—" "The doctor works for me," Sandro interrupted gently, "and I heal quickly." Looking closer, I could now see the slight stiffness in his movements, the carefully controlled breathing that suggested his ribs were still causing considerable pain. He was masking it well, but he was far from healed. "You're going to re-injure yourself," I sighed, finally taking the offered seat. "And we still need to talk about the dog." "Puppy," he corrected again, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "And yes, I should have consulted you. It won't happen again." The easy capitulation surprised me. "It won't happen again because we won't be here much longer," I reminded him, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. "Once the Rossi situation is resolved, Emma and I will return to our own lives." Something darkened in Sandro's gaze. "That may be more complicated now." "Because of Jason?" I kept my voice steady, despite the flutter of fear his words provoked. "Partially." He reached for his coffee, the movement careful and controlled. "Rossi now knows you're connected to me. More importantly, he knows about Emma and her biological connection to Miller." Which means, Sandro said quietly, "that you and Emma will never be truly safe without permanent protection." The implication hung between us, heavy with significance. "Define permanent," I said, echoing our earlier conversation. Sandro's gaze was steady, penetrating. "Marriage." The single word knocked the breath from my lungs. "Excuse me?" "A legal union would place you and Emma under the full protection of the Castellano family," he continued, his tone matter-of-fact despite the bombshell he'd just dropped. "Not a charade or temporary arrangement. An actual marriage with all the security and benefits that entails." "You can't be serious," I managed, though his expression held no hint of humor. "We barely know each other. We know what matters," he countered. "I know you're fiercely protective of Emma, intelligent, resilient, and stronger than you realize. You know I can provide safety, stability, and resources you could never access otherwise. That's not a basis for marriage. That's a business arrangement." Something softened in his gaze. "Is it only business that makes your pulse race when I'm near? Only practical consideration that drew you to my hospital bed last night? Only strategic alliance that made you kiss me in that hallway?" Heat flooded my cheeks at the reminder. "Physical attraction isn't enough for a lifetime commitment. No," he agreed surprisingly. "It's merely a foundation upon which other things can be built." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I'm not proposing a cold merger, Olivia. I'm offering you and Emma a future. Protection, yes, but also possibility." "Possibility of what, exactly?" I asked, not pulling my hand away despite my better judgment. "Of happiness," he said simply. "For all three of us." The sincerity in his voice made my throat tight with emotion. "Sandro, your world. It's dangerous, complicated. Look what happened to you because of us." What happened to me was the result of my own miscalculation, he corrected. A mistake I won't repeat. His thumb traced gentle circles on my wrist, sending shivers up my arm. As for my world, it's changing. Has been, for years. What do you mean? His expression grew more serious. The Castellano family has been transitioning to legitimate business for the past decade. Banking, real estate, technology investments. The old ways, my father's ways, are becoming obsolete. Yet Rossi still exists, I pointed out. Still threatens you. Rossi is the past, Sandro said with quiet conviction. A dying breed clinging to methods that no longer serve. After last night, his days are numbered. A chill ran through me at the implication. What did you do? Nothing yet, he assured me, though there was something deadly in his calm. But Rossi's mistake wasn't attacking me. It was threatening you and Emma. His fingers tightened fractionally around mine. There are rules in our world, lines that aren't crossed, families that aren't targeted. We're not your family, I reminded him, though the words felt hollow even to my own ears. Aren't you? His gaze held mine, challenging and somehow vulnerable simultaneously. Tell me you feel nothing when I touch you. Tell me Emma hasn't blossomed in this home. Tell me you want to return to struggling alone. I couldn't. The truth was, in less than a week, Sandro had become essential, not for his wealth or protection, but for the way he looked at me like I mattered, for how he listened to Emma's endless stories with genuine interest, for the quiet strength he offered without demanding weakness in return. Before I could form a response, Valentina appeared on the terrace, her expression grim. It's time, she said to Sandro, ignoring me completely. They've located Miller. Sandro nodded, his demeanor shifting instantly from the almost tender man who'd proposed marriage to the cold, calculating head of a criminal enterprise. Bring the car around. We leave in 10 minutes. No, I said, the word emerging stronger than I felt. You're injured. You can't just rush off to confront Emma's father. This isn't a confrontation, Sandro replied, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of steel. It's a negotiation. For what? His gaze met mine, unflinching. For your freedom. For Emma's future. He rose carefully, his movements betraying only the slightest hint of pain. I promised you resolution, Olivia. Today, I deliver it. By killing him? The words emerged as barely more than a whisper. By removing him as a threat, Sandro corrected. The method depends entirely on his cooperation. Fear and something darker twisted in my stomach. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. His refusal was immediate, brooking no argument. Emma's biological father is about to disappear from her life permanently, I pressed. I need to be there. I need to understand what's happening. It's too dangerous. So is leaving me here to imagine the worst, I countered. If you want me to consider your proposal, your real proposal, then you need to show me who you really are, all of you. Not just the parts you think I can handle. Valentina made a sound of disbelief. She's either very brave or very foolish, brother. Perhaps both, Sandro murmured, studying me with new consideration. Very well. But you will follow my instructions exactly. No questions, no hesitation. I nodded, suddenly uncertain if I'd made a terrible mistake. What about Emma? Isabel will watch her. The house is secure. His expression softened fractionally. She'll be safe with Cosimo until we return. 30 minutes later, I found myself in the back of a sleek SUV with Sandro, driving toward the industrial district near the lake. Valentina sat in the passenger seat while one of Sandro's security detail drove, the atmosphere in the vehicle tense with unspoken danger. Miller is being held at one of our warehouses, Sandro explained, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. He was attempting to flee the city after last night's encounter. Is he hurt? I asked, unsure why I even cared after what Jason had done. Not yet, Valentina answered coldly from the front seat. Sandro shot his sister a warning look before returning his attention to me. Miller has information we need about Rossi's operations. In exchange for that information, he'll be offered certain considerations. Like what? A new identity, relocation to another country, sufficient funds to start over. Sandro's expression remained neutral. In return, he relinquishes all parental rights to Emma and agrees never to contact either of you again. The clinical way he outlined the destruction of a man's life should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a surprising calm. And if he refuses, he won't, Sandro said with quiet certainty. The warehouse loomed ahead, an unremarkable building with no external signs of the drama unfolding inside. We were ushered through a side entrance by more of Sandro's men, their expressions grim, weapons visible beneath tailored jackets. Inside, the space had been converted into some sort of makeshift office. Leather chairs, a polished table, even a bar cart stocked with crystal decanters, all incongruous against the industrial backdrop. And there, seated in one of those chairs with hands bound before him, was Jason Miller. 6 years had changed him. The boyish good looks I'd once found charming had hardened into something cruel. His hair was expensively cut, his clothing designer labels, but his eyes were the same, calculating, selfish, devoid of empathy. Those eyes widened when he saw me. "Olivia? What the hell?" "Hello, Jason," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "It's been a while." Sandro moved to my side, his hand resting possessively at the small of my back. The gesture wasn't lost on Jason, whose expression darkened with understanding. "So the rumors are true," he sneered. "Castellano's latest whore is my baby mama. Small world." Sandro moved so quickly I barely registered it. One moment beside me, the next looming over Jason with deadly intent. "Speak of her with disrespect again, and this conversation ends permanently." The threat hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. Jason paled slightly, swallowing whatever retort he'd been about to make. "Mr. Miller was just about to explain his role in Rossi's recent activities," Valentina said smoothly, taking a seat across from him, "specifically those involving the surveillance of your apartment." Jason's gaze darted between us, calculating his options. "I didn't know it was Olivia's place," he finally said. "Rossi gave me an address, told me to wire it. I sent guys to do the job." "You expect me to believe you didn't recognize her name?" Sandro's voice was dangerously soft. "Reed isn't her real name," Jason countered, looking at me accusingly. "She changed it after she got pregnant. She was Olivia Martinez when I knew her." I flinched at the revelation of my original surname, one I'd abandoned years ago to make a fresh start, to escape not just Jason, but the foster system identity that had followed me for so long. "A reasonable precaution, given your violent tendencies," Sandro observed coolly, returning to my side. His hand found mine, squeezing gently in silent support. Jason's eyes narrowed at the gesture. "Playing happy families now? Does she know what you really are, Castellano? What you've done?" "She knows what matters," Sandro replied, echoing his earlier words to me. "Which is more than you ever bothered to learn about her." I stepped forward, needing to take control of this narrative. "Why did you never come looking for Emma? For us?" Jason had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. I was climbing the ranks. A kid would have been a liability. "And now?" I pressed. "Now that you know where we are, who she is?" His expression turned calculating. Now she's leverage. Rossi sees that. Your boyfriend here sees it too, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. "She's your daughter," I said, disgust rising in my throat. "She's DNA," he corrected coldly. "Nothing more." I felt Sandro tense beside me, his control visibly straining. I squeezed his hand, a silent plea to let me handle this. "Then this should be simple," I said, matching Jason's clinical tone. "You sign away all parental rights. You leave the country and never contact us again. In exchange, you get a new life instead of whatever alternative Sandro is considering." Jason's laugh was bitter. "You think it's that easy? Rossi will hunt me down wherever I go. He doesn't allow deserters. Rossi will no longer be a concern," Sandro stated with such calm certainty that even Jason looked momentarily unnerved. "What does that mean?" "It means," Valentina interjected, that while we're having this charming reunion, our associates are dismantling Rossi's operation piece by piece, his warehouses, his distribution networks, his political connections, all being severed as we speak. Jason's face drained of color. That's impossible. Rossi has protection. Had protection, Sandro corrected. Amazing how quickly allegiances shift when certain financial irregularities come to light, when evidence of human trafficking reaches the right federal authorities. I stared at him, understanding dawning. You've been planning this. Since the night at the restaurant, he confirmed, his gaze never leaving Jason. Rossi's attack merely accelerated the timeline. Jason slumped in his chair, defeat evident in every line of his body. So that's it? I sign your papers and disappear? That's the offer, Sandro confirmed. It expires in 5 minutes. I watched as Jason's survival instinct warred with his pride. Finally, he nodded. I want 2 million. Cash. 1 million, Sandro countered. New identity, passage to Europe, and you never attempt to contact Olivia or Emma again. Any violation of these terms results in immediate consequences. Fine, Jason muttered. Get me the papers. Valentina produced documents with suspicious efficiency, as though this outcome had never been in doubt. As I watched Jason sign away his parental rights with the same careless disregard with which he'd abandoned us 6 years ago, a profound sense of closure washed over me. This chapter of my life, our lives, was ending. The question remaining was what would begin in its place. The drive back to Sandro's mansion passed mostly in silence, my mind processing everything that had happened. Jason would be escorted directly to a private airfield, his new identity already waiting, his old life effectively erased. Are you all right? Sandro asked quietly as we neared home, his hand covering mine on the seat between us. I'm not sure, I admitted. It feels final, like a door closing. And opening, he suggested gently. If you want it to be. I turned to study his profile, this complex man who had upended my world in less than a week. Your proposal. Was it just about protection? About keeping Emma and me close because of some sense of responsibility? His gaze met mine, dark and intent. I haven't felt simply responsible for a woman since I was 20 years old, cara mia. His thumb traced patterns on my wrist in a way that made my pulse quicken. What I feel for you, for Emma, is something far more complicated. And far more valuable. It's still too fast, I whispered, though my objection sounded weak even to my own ears. Perhaps, he acknowledged. But some connections don't adhere to conventional timelines. From the moment I saw you sitting alone at that restaurant table, something in me recognized something in you. Because I look like Sophia, I said, the old insecurity surfacing. No, he said firmly. Because you look like yourself, strong, resilient, fiercely protective of what you love. His hand tightened around mine. Sophia was a beautiful memory from another lifetime. You, Olivia Reed, are my present. And if you'll allow it, my future. We pulled through the gates of the mansion, the familiar structure suddenly appearing different to my eyes, not a temporary sanctuary, but a potential home. As we stepped from the car, Emma came racing across the lawn, Cosimo bounding awkwardly at her heels. Mommy! Sandro! She called, her face alight with joy. Look! Cosimo can fetch! Sandro crouched to her level, wincing slightly as his injured ribs protested but hiding it well. Can he now? What a clever puppy. Perhaps you can show me his tricks after dinner. Can we eat in the garden, please? With the fish fountain? Emma's eyes, so like mine, pleaded with an expression she'd clearly learned was effective on her new protector. If your mother agrees, Sandro replied, glancing up at me with a question in his gaze that went far beyond dinner arrangements. Looking at them together, my bright, beautiful daughter and this dangerous, complex man who had somehow become essential to both of us, I felt something shift into place within me. A recognition. A certainty. The garden sounds perfect, I said, my decision encompassing far more than our evening meal. I think we'd all like that very much. Sandro's smile, a real one that transformed his severe features into something breathtaking, told me he understood exactly what I was agreeing to. He rose, moving to my side with that fluid grace that still made my heart race. "Welcome home, cara mia," he murmured, his lips brushing my temple in a gesture that felt like a promise. "Welcome home."